Hi, I'm Andrew Wasson. Thanks for joining me for my weekly guitar blog. It's April 6th, 2014. This week we're going to do a lesson discussing targeting chord extensions. And this week's question was sent in from Ray. He's out in New Ellenton, South Carolina, and he wrote in with this email. I'm a longtime fan of classic country and jazz music. Recently I've been getting into the theory how the guitar players in this style seem to play into chord extensions. There seems to be a lot of emphasis upon the 9th and 13th extensions. I can more or less understand what they're doing, but I was wondering if you could show a method for totally getting this down onto the fretboard. From Ray in New Ellenton, South Carolina, USA. Well, thanks for writing in, Ray. You know, the chord extensions are an excellent sound to target into when building lines for jazz and classic country. The idea isn't complex. Basically, the extensions are scale tones up an octave, so a 9th is really just a second, and a 13th is basically a major 6. Now, in order to nail these notes on the neck during a solo or in a melodic statement that you're composing for an instrumental piece or whatever, the work will be a lot like what we've covered in the past with targeting into basic chord tones like the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. The only difference will be in memorizing the locations of the extensions in relationship to chord tones you already know. So to help get this idea started for you, I've created a notes on the neck diagram showing how the chord tones and extensions lay upon the fingerboard. We're going to do an on-screen capture theory lesson with that first, and then we'll head to the guitar neck later and cover some more material with this. So let's do that theory lesson right now. Well, when it comes to targeting chord extensions, in particular the 9th and 13th extensions, there's a couple of ideas that we really want to keep in mind. Primarily, I want to start down here on the lower portion of the page and explain a couple things about octaves as well as fifths. Now, first of all, octaves, these are very important. They're the naming notes of the chord, and they never move. What I mean by they never move is as we move through the different types of chord qualities, such as the major 7, minor 7th, and the dominant 7th chords, really any kind of chord quality out there, diminished and augmented, the root obviously will never move. So we can use it as a guide point. It's almost like our true north on the neck, and it never is going to move around in regard to what kind of quality chord we happen to be on. So that's a very important one. The other idea that's kind of interesting is the 5th chord tone. In our primary set of chords, which happens to be major, minor, and dominant, we do not really see that 5th chord tone offering any kind of change to the quality. So it does not affect anything differently as we move through major to minor to dominant 7th. In fact, as we go into the extended chords, a lot of times that 5th is dropped, so it's really good to know its location. So if you know the locations of all your octaves and your roots, that's primary, and then know the locations of your fifths as well, because it can be very helpful in the long run. Now, next thing I want to do is outline this particular chord that we're using. We're using an A major 7th. I just want to sort of wrap around it here so you know exactly what we're thinking in terms of, and we're taking the chord tones of A, C sharp, E, and G, which is the root, major 3rd, perfect 5th, and major 7th, and we're laying them out in a voicing on the neck, going from the root of A to the major 7th, G sharp, major 3rd, C sharp, and then perfect 5th up here to E. And the main thing that I want to get into in terms of the other chord tones, which are the 13th of F sharp and the 9th of the B natural, is I want you to become aware of their location in respect to the 5th and to the uppermost octave of our root. Now, there is one root here that I did highlight on the 4th guitar string at the 7th fret. I just put it there because it's so important to know where those naming notes are. So I wanted you to be well aware of where all of the A notes are in this location that we're dealing with here. However, getting back to this idea of these particular extensions of the 9th and the 13th, you can notice that they're a whole step up in each case. The one case away from the uppermost octave A note, which we already know never changes. It's always going to be that distance. And then the 5th as well, if it happens to be in the chord, again, always that same distance. It does not get affected by major and minor. So keep this in mind. This is the way that you'll be able to locate them, regardless of whatever voicing that you're using. As long as you have your scoped out identity of where the 5th and the uppermost octave are, you're going to be just fine. Now let's move to the guitar fingerboard next. I want to run through all this information that we just covered in the screen capture here. I want to do it on the guitar fingerboard, and I also want to bring into to play a guitar lick so that we can move through our major, minor, and dominant 7th chords, make our alterations to a guitar lick that really feeds off of the targeting of the 9th and the 13th. So let's go and do that next. Well, as we'd seen in the on-screen example with the major 7th chord and its relationship into 9 and into the 13th, the layout of the tones is pretty straightforward, as it is with any kind of chord, shape on the neck. You want to understand the grip, first of all, how you put your fingers down and get good clarity and all that. But next thing you want to do is analyze how this thing is going to work on the neck theoretically. And we're going to begin with that same major 7th chord, but later we'll also look at minor 7 and dominant 7th as well. But starting off here, in order to gain a perspective of exactly where the chord tones are located and where the 9th and the 13th extensions can be found, we need to have some kind of strategy in place, and the approach that we're going to take is one in which, where we fret out a chord pattern, and then we're going to call out the specific chord tones of where the root 3rd, 5th, and 7th are. So in this particular voicing, we've got A, G sharp, C sharp, and E. So we just want to call those out. That's the root, 7th, and then the 3rd, and then the 5th up top. Then in the upper fretboard register, using that whole step approach, now we know where the 5th and where the upper octave of A is located. We're going to find our 9th, which will be a whole step above the A, and then the 13th, that's going to be a whole step above that 5th. So we establish that relationship, and you want to know what those are. So that's a F sharp in this case, that's a B in this case. Get your notes together, establish where things are located, and then you have your foundational fingerboard layout all together for yourself. And finally, the thing that I think is really important to lock all this down and how we can really apply the information musically, I think it's important to make some kind of guitar lick or even just a short melodic statement which includes both the 9th and the 13th extensions. So I put together a major tonality melody sound here, targeting into that 9th and that 13th. We're going to start on the 9th, on that B note. We're going to do it an octave lower on the 3rd string, 4th fret, and we're going to come from that note. We're going to wrap up on the 13th there on that 7th fret, 2nd string. So we have some triplets out front. We roll over into the 13th there because that's the F sharp down an octave. And then we have the major 7 into the octave of A, and then the major 3rd, perfect 5th. And then we go from that 13th up a whole step. And we have the major 7th again up there, the B note, and then the resolution over into the 13th. So we're really targeting out the sound of a A major 13th chord. Here's that run again. And that works perfectly over, anything really. You could have an A major 7, you could have A major 9. It's all going to work just perfectly on all those kinds of chords. Now, let's carry this concept over, though, into minor 7th. Now, since the only chord tones that shift around in the construction of a minor 7th from major 7th are the 3rd and the 7th degree. So remember, they were here. They're going to drop down a half a step. So now we have our minor 3rd, minor 7th, which shift down a half step lower. And, once again, you want to make sure you can scope out where those 13th and 9ths are located in the strategy that we were talking through. And now the other thing is to develop our guitar lick that we established from the major 7 chord, and we want to manipulate the guitar lick so that it runs properly through the minor tonality. So we're going to start the same from the 9th to the 13th, but we're going to go now from a flat 7 tone, a G natural, and then we're going to head over to our flat 3rd, which is that C natural. So now that's our new layout, covering the sound of minor 7. The top end of everything is going to be pretty much the same. The G sharp, you can still kind of move into it if you want to. That's what I'm going to do. But, if you want to make it more tight to the chord, you could just come up into G natural. So your lick can go like this. Now, to me, that doesn't sound as hip as going into the G sharp. Even though the G sharp isn't part of the chord, still colors it out very cool. And I have some videos online that discuss how to use a major 7 on a minor 7 chord. You may want to check those out if you're a little bit confused of why that actually sounds the way it does. But let's move onwards here to the dominant 7th chord, our final primary chord in our musical language. And the dominant 7th chord construction formula gives us a series of chord tones that establishes from the root there we'll have major 3rd with a flat 7, and we still have the perfect 5th on top. But in that dominant 7th quality, the 7th degree, remember, it's lowered. So we have a major 3rd and a minor 7. So this means that the root of A is going to be a whole step away from the G chord tone. So we need G natural instead of G sharp there. Now, relating the 9th and the 13th is still the same concept, has no real bearing on the fact that we've now moved into dominant 7th, so that's cool. And you know, however, the melodic idea that we've been carrying over from each of these examples, we're going to need to maybe pay some attention to that 7th chord tone and ensure it coincides as the proper lowered 7th degree. Now, it doesn't mean that you still can't use that major 7th. That's kind of a neat sound, but you probably want to drop that now. It's going to be a little bit more into the scope of the chord tones for that dominant 7th there. So here's our run for the melodic statement now in the color of dominant 7th. So here we have pretty much the same line almost as how we started with minor, with the G natural sliding to the octave of A, but we're going to have a major 3rd to the perfect 5th, and then we have that slide into that G natural here. You can hear it's kind of a really different sour color on that chord, which is the whole element of what goes on with dominant 7th. Here, just one more last time to wrap it up. So as you can tell, chord tones and extensions play a big role in the development of highly connected solos and composed melody lines. The better we can become at targeting into chords and extensions, the better our lead playing and composition will become. So in bringing this technique into your playing, you'll need to become extremely aware of the specific notes found within a chord. Start with something simple like the roots and octaves, then branch out into learning how the 5th chord tone sits on the neck. These intervals never move within the major, minor, and dominant 7th chords, and you can use them as guide tones to slowly memorize where all the other extensions can be found nearby. A combination of exercise work like saying the notes out loud as you play through the chord tones of specific chord patterns on the neck, and also always remember drawing stuff out on paper. Get guitar fingerboard diagram paper, draw this stuff out on a piece of paper with a pencil. Go old school. I'll tell you, it makes a big, big difference. It goes a long way in getting all this stuff truly memorized. Anyhow, that's about all the time I have for today. As always, thanks for watching. Have yourself a great week, and I'll catch up with you next time. Bye for now.